In this video, we are going to discuss the one of the important recovery technique, shadow paging. In shadow paging technique, when a transaction begins executing, then two pages or two directories is used. One is current directory and another is shadow directory. Now, what is current directory and what is shadow directory? And this is the main database disk blocks, and here there is current directory and another shadow directory. So what is the use of these three? When a transaction begins, current directory whose entries point to the most recent or current database pages on the disk. This is main database pages. Most recent pages are in the current directory, and this current directory is copied in the shadow directory. Okay, the shadow directory is then saved on the disk while the current directory is used for the transaction. During the transaction execution, the shadow directory, during the transaction, this shadow directory never modified. When a write item operation is performed, suppose this block is indicated in the main directory in our database, main disk block in this database. Okay, this blocks, and this block point to this page. At the initial state, this current directory and shadow directory is same. So page 1, suppose this points to this in current directory, and also in shadow directory this points to this. At the initial state, current directory, and at the beginning, actually the meaning is at the beginning of the transaction, this current directory and shadow directory points the same block in the database disk blocks. Okay, now when a write item operation executes, suppose here the write item operation executes, and at the beginning, at the initial state when transaction begins, this block points to the database disk block here, and so in the shadow paging also, in the shadow directory, this points here. Now suppose in this block some write item operation executes, and when write item operation executes or this operation is performed, a new copy of the modified database is created. Okay, so instead of overwritten here, actually this old page is not overwritten. Instead of this overwritten here, a new page is created in some previously unused disk block. So new page is created here. So old page is this old page is not overwritten when the write item operation is performed. So a new page is created somewhere, some unused disk block, and but in the case of shadow directory, this is not updated. Okay, then this points the previous value, but in current directory this is updated. So the old version is referenced by the shadow directory, and the new version is referenced by the current directory. That is the main thing happening here. Now, to recover from the failure during transaction, what is the logic behind it? It is sufficient to free the modified database pages and discard the current directory if the transaction abort or failed in some points. So the state of the database before transaction execution is available to the shadow directory, and that state is recovered from this shadow directory, shadow pages. Okay, so the database thus return to its initial state, the state before execution of the transaction. Suppose in case of some crash of hard disk occurs, so we can return in the previous state from the shadow directory. Now if the transaction successful, then what happens? That after committing, if the transaction successful means the transaction after commits a transaction, then committing a transaction corresponds to discarding of the previous shadow directory. So when the transaction commits, this new current directory is copied to this shadow directory. Okay, thus this is updated. If the transaction successful, the current directory is now copied to the new shadow directory, and in that case after copying, this will point here. This will point here. Okay, after transaction successful. So our new shadow directory, in our new shadow directory, this page 5 will point here. Okay, since recovery involves neither undoing or not redoing data item, this technique is called as no undo, no redo technique for recovery.